Reddit, what is your best instant karma story? When I was a kid, about 9 or so, my dad and I were at the airport food court eating while waiting on our flight. My eyes were bigger than my stomach and I didn't touch my fries. Rather than throw them away, I asked some lady if she wanted them free, of course. When we get to the main lobby for our flight, lo and behold, who do we see? Yup, that same lady. She was in the main kiosk as a flight agent, and she let us know she gave us a comp upgrade to business class. That was the first time I had ever flown business class. In the 90s I bought a newspaper every day from a newspaper box. You stick 35 cents into coin slot to unlock. One day I took 2 papers. As I walked away with both papers, my shirt tail got stuck in the door of the newspaper box. Had to pay 35 cents to get my shirt back out. I was at a crosswalk in Brooklyn looking left, then right, then left again. A guy in a suit pauses a yelling cell phone conversation to snicker at me, saying, "It's a one-way, bro." No sooner had he set foot in the intersection than he has a mild collision with a bicyclist going the wrong way. Neither was hurt enough to slow down, and as the cyclist rode off, the two competed to see who could say, "Watch where you're going" the loudest. It was a tie. I witnessed a road rage incident where a man got out of his car at a red light, went to the door of the driver of a minivan and yelled at the window for a minute. When the light turned green, he went to get back in his car, but his door was locked. This is beautifully simple and I can just imagine the look on the man's face. Confusion, then realization, then rage, followed by shame. Glorious. When I was in high school, there was always a bit of a bottleneck to get out of the student parking lot at the end of the day. Basically you had to let people pull out of the aisles as you came down the side so you could leave. I let a car go from the last aisle, and then this guy I knew, the weirdest, douchiest kid in the school, tried to give himself the worst, cringiest nicknames on multiple occasions. Darted out in front of me and then he and the dipshits in his car started pointing and laughing at me. While he was looking back at me, he rear-ended the car in front of him. Got to work and immediately got asked to deal with a difficult customer who had rang the store from a parking bay in our car park. Lady says she has the wrong frozen drink and wants a refund and a replacement, literally a $1. I take out the $1 and try to find out what drink she wants. She goes off because she also wanted a refund for the fries because the event has made her sick to her stomach because of bad customer service. I say that I didn't know she wanted a full refund as it wasn't mentioned on the phone literally as I walked into the office. She keeps going on about how she is now going to be late for the 4 minutes she spent in park and rants for 5 more minutes about service before I tell her that I'm going to get her refund to try and make sure she still gets to her event. She throws the bag of fries at me, hitting me in the chest, and I grab it and walk off to get her refund. Keeps yelling until I get back with the $2.60. Turns out the man behind her watched the whole thing, and because she was in a company car he reported her to the company. Tupperware. She was fired that afternoon. The lady then tried to get me fired saying I caused it and to get compensation. Our customer service team laughed at her and eventually my owner had to call her. When he called her she started swearing at him and he told her, "If you're going to swear at me I'm going to tell Tupperware again," and hung up. Only time I think the abused staff member has actually had a big win in my job. In middle school I had to share a bus stop with this girl who lived down the street from me. She was a little turd who would treat her friends great and nearly everybody else like crap, but she never bugged me all that much. Sometimes we even talked while waiting for the bus, like she had this streak of normality she only let show occasionally. Well, one day we were walking back home from the bus stop and talking about our day, when she suddenly asked me to stop walking. I hesitated for a moment, but stopped anyway. She was on the opposite side of the street from me, and I thought she wanted to cross so we weren't yelling back and forth. We lived on a dirt road, and it was spring, meaning you had to constantly avoid massive puddles collecting in the potholes. I only had a few seconds to realize that she had just asked me to stop because there was a car coming down the street, about to splash me with the rancid mud that had collected in the fairly large puddle right next to me. I only had a second to throw up my arms and prepare for the worst. I got one look at her smug face and big stupid grin, right before the driver veered to the right and absolutely soaked her in mud and whatever god awful mess was in the puddle next to her. The sad part is, I never got a glimpse at the driver. I was too focused on laughing my butt off as she swore and stomped up her driveway to the back door. We didn't talk much after that. I think she was too embarrassed, but that driver is a goddamn hero. I got a virus on my PC, keystroke logger I assume, and some dumb butthole bought my eBay and PayPal login and password and went shopping. I call him a dumb butthole, as he didn't bother taking 5 minutes to lock me out the accounts. He just went shopping for TVs, cameras, iPads, you name it. I changed my passwords and locked him out, then wiped my PC. On my phone I got all the purchase receipt emails as he made each purchase, including his name and delivery address. I was in the passing lane on the highway slowly coming up on a couple of cars in the right lane. The speed limit was about to decrease ahead and another car came up behind me going pretty fast. Instead of gazing it to get ahead of the traffic to my right, I slowed down and pulled in behind them, with the car behind me right on my butt. Once I got into the right lane the car floored it and passed me honking the horn, and the passenger's body was half out of the car window yelling at me and flipping me off as they passed. Turns out the car I pulled in behind was an unmarked state trooper who promptly pulled them over. Justice. As a teacher, I get to experience instant karma daily. One that sticks out in particular: I had a student when I was teaching at a middle school who was loud, obnoxious and willing to do anything for attention. We had just finished an exam which required stapled papers in order to be turned in, and he kept hitting the stapler against his hand with it open. All I said was, "Hey, if you keep hitting that stapler against your hand with it open, it probably won't end well for you." He responded with, "I do this all the time. I've never been stabbed." Click. Student lets out the loudest scream I've ever heard. Bleeding, crying, I'm laughing, on the inside hopefully, and sent him out to the office. I was commuting into Atlanta for a work matter. Dude in a nice car was cutting lanes and going like 90 miles per hour. 2 cars in front of me, he cuts off a Dodge Charger and it flicks on its undercover lights. It made my day since Atlanta traffic was terrible and everyone living in GA knew that, but it was douchebags like this that would take your commute time from an hour to 2 hours because they were careless and crashed. Trying to get home to my parents for Christmas in a blizzard and a guy started tailgating me on the highway, flashing his lights, the works. This goes on for a mile or so until I slow to a crawl enough for him to get the hint to go around. He speeds off and about a half mile down the road I see him facing the other way on the side of the road. Similar story, was driving in a blizzard and a tandem semi-truck, UPS, in fact, comes zooming up behind me, so I get into the far right lane. I'm going about 25. This dude had to be going twice that. Shortly after passing me, the truck starts swerving. Both trailers going in opposite directions. He ended up in the median. Luckily, no one was injured by his foolish driving. I was coming home from school with a friend. Early in the journey I slipped on ice, but managed to keep my balance and didn't fall. My friend laughed out loud like a maniac. A few moments later, he fell face down into the ice. This reminds me of a similar one I had. Was skating with a couple friends at night and hit a crack in the path that stopped my board and I stumbled forward off of the board. My friend laughed his butt off. Not long afterwards, his wheel hits a crack which stops the board, but his dumb ass doesn't react in time and just face plants and scratches up his chin. A guy and some of his friends were crossing the street when the light said not to. This was on the day of the St. Patrick's Day parade in Chicago, so there was a lot of people downtown and everyone was drunk and crossing the street when they shouldn't be. When the car they were walking in front of honked at them, the guy got mad and started yelling at the driver, and the driver and him get into an argument of sorts where they trade some vulgar hand signs. At the end the guy flips off the driver and then spits on his window. A few seconds later we hear sirens and see lights flashing. The cops stop right in front of the guy and his friends and arrest him. A woman was 70 cents short on her purchase, so I'll let it go. When counting her change I noticed a 1960 silver dime. A guy stole my bike from a rack a couple of weeks ago. When people approached him, he took off on foot and got hit by a car, making it much easier for the police to find and arrest him. The poor woman that hit him was distraught and convinced she killed him, but he ended up with just some scrapes and bruises. Had just passed my driving test in UK and got a car. Knew the road had speed cameras on, so was being very careful, and this van behind me was tailing me. He was obviously annoyed at me observing the speed limit, overtook and got flashed by the speed camera just ahead. I have a friend with muscular dystrophy. We and some other friends had gone to Mitsuwa, a bitchin' Japanese grocery store. When we came out, a sports car was parked on the goddamn lines between the two handicapped spots, meaning my friend couldn't even get in his van because that space is where his ramp needs to come out. We went into the store kinda thinking maybe they could just make an announcement, but customer service said to call the cops. So, we waited for a while, and finally the young lady who done this dong move came out of the store and went to get in her car. We told her we'd called the cops and she kinda laughed. No, we really called the cops. Luckily the traffic cop pulled up right that moment. She made the girl move and we were able to go on our way and watch her receive, I can only hope, a fairly hefty ticket as we went. Where I live, it's a $250 fine for parking in a handicapped space without a permit. I'd like to think that we got a $500 fine for impeding 2 spaces. My dad stopped paying my college tuition without telling me. I would have understood if he told me, which resulted in me going to school to register for classes and being told I couldn't. But I had already signed a semester lease on a condo, and ended having to leave campus shortly after and go back home to work full-time until I got off on my own. Christmas, my dad had me a $5 lottery ticket in my stocking and I won $30,000. Playing tug of war with the girlfriend's dog. Win the rope. Throw it across the room, except my aim is crap and I take out a framed picture of her and said dog. Grab my glass of wine to take a drink. Dog saunters back over with the rope, puts his snout under my arm to get attention, flips his head back, thus throwing my wine holding hand into the air. Full glass of wine showers all over me. TLDR. Dog upsets about broken picture, whines. I was on safari in Kenya with my slightly psychotic family. It was the morning of departure and we had to get from the safari lodge to the airstrip and then fly back to Nairobi. The plan was to have one safari jeep full of our luggage, which would go straight to the airstrip. The other safari jeep would take my family on one last excursion to see some animals before heading to the airstrip. I enter the safari jeep last and I take the only available seat at the very back. Not a very good seat to spot animals from. Suddenly, my sister starts freaking the frick out and screaming at me for taking that seat. WTF. I had already had enough of her drama from all the previous days, so I just got out of the jeep and went to sit in the other jeep, which was going straight to the airstrip. We started driving and I was prepared to have to wait for my family at the airstrip in the blistering heat while they're out looking for animals. But then, about 10 minutes into the drive, I suddenly spot a herd of no less than 15 elephants. I asked the guide if we can get any closer. He literally drove right into the middle of the herd. I was surrounded by elephants of all ages. We were so close. It was truly an amazing sight. So the guide used his walkie-talkie to inform the other guide that he should bring the rest of my family here. We stayed there for a good 10 minutes as we watched the herd slowly walk from the field into the bushes. By the time my family arrived at the scene, it was too late. All the elephants had migrated into the bushes and were nowhere to be seen. And guess whose favorite animal is the elephant? My sister's. This happened just 2 days ago, and I deserved it. So my dad was working on a cabinet, so he was wearing reading glasses and a headlamp to be able to see the small parts as precisely as he could. I laughed and gave him a hard time about the combination before he went down to the basement. It was at this moment that the storm outside knocked the power out for about 4 hours, and I was struggling to get my bearings because of how dark it had become. It was around 9 PM. My dad, on the other hand, was down in the basement with his headlamp on and laughed at me when he got upstairs, especially when I had to ask for his help finding the flashlight in my room. I was sitting as a guest at dinner at a wedding reception. People were tapping their glasses to get the bride and groom to kiss. One guy at my table got really obnoxious with it and started banging on the glass vase centerpiece, loud and hard. He kept doing it, over and over, every couple of minutes. Bong 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 bong, until finally it went bong 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 ploop. The vase didn't shatter, instead he put a hole in it. A spoon-sized piece of glass broke away and the vase, which was a good 20 inches tall and filled with water, began to empty as water poured out the hole like a spigot, directly into his wife's lap. I felt bad for her, but oh man, that was gratifying. Back in college, I was crossing the street when this butthole on a motorcycle decided pedestrians shouldn't be allowed to cross in the crosswalk, blew the red light and nearly ran me down. I stood there a second, annoyed, but thought, nothing I can do about it, when another motorcycle came past me. This time it was a police officer. He looked at me, grinned broadly and gave me a thumbs up, and then pulled over the other guy and gave him a ticket. Imagine the joy that cop felt when he gestured. Watch this. In 6th grade we had a substitute who might have been insane. She would show up and start yelling about the most random things. Most people were too afraid to talk when she was in class. One day she was subbing another class and stopped me on my way to the office. She told me how terrible my class was and how bad of a person and student I am. I was a quiet straight A kid. I kept walking and she followed. She stared at me while talking and walked into a large metal pole. I just kept walking when she fell to the ground. My so sent me that video of the girl who was trying to make a curling iron tutorial for YouTube and accidentally burned her hair off. So made fun of her pretty relentlessly. She was in the UK at the time visiting her grandmother, had a cheap plug adapter which apparently didn't account for the voltage difference, and burned her own hair off with her curling iron the next day. I was driving home with some friends and this jackass in the lane next to us kept making shady maneuvers. I would stop at a red light, the light would turn green, he would floor it and start weaving in and out of traffic, cutting people off, squeezing into openings he had no business squeezing into, and almost causing accidents. Then the next light would turn red, he'd slam on the brakes, and we'd end up waiting at the light next to him again. It must have happened at like 5 lights in a row. Finally he finds an opening, punches it, and just speeds off into the distance, probably going double the speed limit. About a mile down the road we see a cop on the side of the road, with his lights on, and somebody pulled over. We are all like, oh please let it be this freaking butthole. Sure enough we drive by, see that it's him, and everybody just starts laughing. It was so satisfying. I've always been confused as to why people feel the need to get to the red light before everyone else. If anything, you're just wasting gas. Plus, now I get to pull up in the lane next to you really slowly. I was on the beach with my family. My young brother fell on the water and got a face full of sand. I was laughing my butt off when a huge wave came behind me, hit me hard, and I got a mouthful of salt water. My dad laughed his butt off. Butthole at work was spending all day freaking around on his new phone. This was when iPhones were new, and showing it off before dropping it onto the grill. Grilled apples aren't too bad. You could make a pie. You have been visited by the wisdom papa. Type study well papa or you will fail your next test at school. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.